Let's imagine the American justice system as a door. Not just any door, but a really heavy one. Cold, steel, and for thousands of people, it's been locked from the wrong side. Today, we're going to talk about what it takes to get that door open, and what's already been lost by the time it finally creaks open.
Before this heavy door opens, just pause with us for a moment. You see, a story like this, it just shouldn't be heard in silence. It really demands our attention. It demands witnesses. To really get a handle on why this door is so heavy, we first have to wrap our heads around the sheer scale of the problem. This isn't about a few isolated mistakes, not even close.
Look at this number, 3,478. That's how many people have been exonerated in the United States since 1999. That's thousands of lives officially acknowledged to have been completely derailed by a wrongful conviction.
And this number? 2,230. That is the total number of years that people exonerated in 2023 alone spent behind bars for crimes they didn't commit. Let that sink in. That's over 2 millennia of stolen time in just a single year.
And to make that abstract number painfully real, I want you to meet Glenn Simmons. He was convicted of murder way back in 1975. When he was finally exonerated in 2023, he had lost more than 48 years of his life. That isn't just a statistic. That's a whole lifetime.
So you have to be asking, how does this even happen? How does the door get locked on the wrong person in the first place? Well, it's not one single key turning the wrong way. It's actually a series of deep, systemic cracks and failures. You know, the National Registry of Exonerations points to a familiar list of causes. Things like mistaken identifications, flawed science, a bad lawyer. But what's truly chilling is when you see how often the very pillars of our justice system just crumble. I mean, look at this list. We're talking about false testimony, misconduct by officials, and even false confessions. The system is failing at its most fundamental levels.
And if you look at the data from just 2023, it tells a really damning story. The two most common factors here weren't simple mistakes, they were intentional acts. In a staggering 77% of exonerations, there was official misconduct, and in 76%, there was perjury or a false accusation. This isn't just human error. This points to a deliberate corruption of the process. It speaks to a system where the pressure to secure convictions is so immense that rules get bent or just flat out broken, and accountability is often nowhere to be found. The system didn't just fail, in many of these cases, it was actively manipulated.
And then you have false confessions. It's the question we all ask. Why would an innocent person ever confess? Well, you have to understand, police interrogation is, as the Supreme Court itself has said, inherently coercive. Under hours of intense psychological pressure, isolation, and pure exhaustion, people can be led to believe that confessing is their only way out of that room. As Amanda Knox later said about her own coerced confession, her statements were made under stress, shock, and extreme exhaustion. The mind can be pushed to a breaking point where the truth itself just seems to bend. Now, once that heavy door slams shut, you'd think proving your innocence would be the key to opening it. But the reality is, the system builds a wall of procedure around that conviction, a wall that is incredibly difficult to tear down. So, broadly speaking, there are 3 main ways a convicted person can try to get relief. You have the direct appeal, you have these historical legal challenges called writs, and finally, you have a plea for mercy from the executive branch, something called clemency. And on paper, these sound like pretty robust safety nets. But this slide just brilliantly shows the massive gap between the promise and the reality. Take the direct appeal. It promises to correct trial errors. But the reality? You can't introduce new evidence. So if proof of your innocence, say a new DNA test, emerges after the trial, that appeal can't help you. Then there's habeas corpus, which promises a way to challenge your detention. But get this, in a shocking 1993 Supreme Court decision, the court ruled that a claim of actual innocence by itself is not a federal constitutional violation. Let that sink in. The highest court in the land has said that just being innocent isn't enough. And finally, clemency. It's supposed to be the failsafe, but it's often granted to those who show remorse. And how can you possibly be remorseful for a crime you didn't commit? So the crucial point here is that the very paths designed to lead to freedom are often impassable for the innocent. So with the official doors all but barred, a new set of locksmiths has emerged. We're talking about dedicated groups of lawyers, journalists, and even some prosecutors who have made it their mission to investigate these seemingly hopeless cases. Organizations like the Innocence Project and the team behind the National Registry of Exonerations have become absolutely essential. They are, in a way, the system's conscience. They aren't just advocates. They are forensic investigators, dusting off old files, demanding new DNA tests on decades-old evidence, and uncovering the facts that were either overlooked or maybe even deliberately buried.
And their work is absolutely critical. In 2023, these professional exonerators, and that includes innocence organizations and special prosecutorial units, were involved in 63% of all exonerations. Think about that. More than half of the wrongfully convicted who walked free last year did so because these groups figured out how to pick the lock.
And one of the most significant developments we've seen is the rise of conviction integrity units, or CIUs. These are special units inside a prosecutor's office, and they're dedicated to re-examining old cases from their own jurisdiction. This is the system attempting to police itself. It's an acknowledgement that its ultimate duty isn't just to convict, but to ensure justice is served, even if it means admitting to a past, devastating error.
But what happens when the lock is finally picked and that heavy door does swing open? Is the story over? Is justice finally served?
And here is Glyn Simmons again, arms raised in triumph. I mean, that is a moment of pure, unadulterated joy. A life interrupted for 48 years is finally his again.
And yet, freedom can't give him back the time he lost. His youth, the moments with family, the life he was supposed to live, all of that is still locked away forever.
And exoneration doesn't erase the scars. Decades of imprisonment leave a profound psychological toll. This chart shows the prevalence of mental health problems. While about 11% of the general population might experience them, that number just skyrockets to 56% for state prisoners and 64% for jail inmates. Exonerees emerge from this environment not just to reclaim a life, but to fight the ghosts of the one that was taken.
You know, there's an old saying, justice delayed is justice denied. But maybe it's something more than that. It's not just denied, it's broken. The door finally opens, yes, but the life you are meant to live will always remain behind it.
And if this story made you think, if it made you feel something about the weight of that door, help others bear witness.
Because these stories, these numbers, these stolen years, they matter. And justice delayed should never, ever be justice forgotten.